Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Onions and Flagons. Apologies about the delay in this episode. We've had a couple of holidays come up and we've both been a bit busy enjoying the sun and enjoying things outside of the world of Dungeons and Dragons. But we are back. We are back this week, and today we're talking about one-shots.
Yeah, you say we've been doing things outside of D&D, but one of our holidays was a D&D session.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. Do what you love when you're in your holidays, I suppose. But we done it out in the wilderness. We done it out in Malin Heads,
yeah.
Out in the brief wilderness where we didn't have internet or anything like that there. So, we were roughing it for that D&D.
The far north of Ireland. The untamed wild.
Yeah, exactly. 30 minutes up the road from where we both live. But yeah, apologies for not being present for the last couple of weeks. But we're back and we're speaking about one-shots, something that's very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, you more than me. I generally prefer long-form campaigns. I just feel like I like a narrative that has many beats and isn't as constrained, where there's more flexibility and freedom to explore and to give the players more agency and to actually listen to them, to incorporate their backstory. There's a lot of positives to longer form campaigns.
Oh yeah,
you don't really get in one shots.
One shots are very much just like a big old party where players can kind of just try something a little bit more weird and wacky, and DMs can try something a little bit more weird and wacky. They're not tied into the responsibilities that a long-running campaign could have.
Yeah.
I myself, as a DM, prefer to do one-shots now, just because I'm an adult. I have responsibilities. I don't necessarily have the freedom that is involved in creating a long-running campaign. I used to do a lot of my own long-running campaigns back in my early days of DMing, but we had a little thing called COVID to thank for that, which gave me a lot of free time.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, I do enjoy being a player for long-running campaigns, but to sit and DM a campaign, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of responsibility. So every now and then, I like to take a special occasion, whether it be Halloween or a trip away with some friends, and use that as an opportunity to make a one-shot that players can play in. And I'll usually run them pretty high level. One-shots give players an opportunity to make level 20 characters, to make something that's really broken, and vice versa. It gives DMs a chance to play that Tarrasque they've always wanted to play, or to play the aspect of Tiamat. Make something that's ridiculously powerful, and both the DM and the players both get a chance to play something that they might not necessarily get to play in their long running campaigns.
And it's an excuse to min-max, because there's there's fewer considerations. If it is a self-contained adventure, you don't need to worry too much about one character outshaining another one, or one character just being objectively or statistically better than another.
Yeah,
it's all about their own personal take, and it's like little temporary, short-term excursion and experiencing things you might not be able to. Like if you're in a campaign and you're playing a warlock, then you're playing a warlock for a long period of time. But maybe you want to try out different classes, different racial options. You want to try some alternative rule systems, additional homebrew rules, where you don't necessarily want to commit to saying, right guys, for the rest of the campaign, here's a homebrew rule that I want to do, because it could lead to issues down the road. But if you're just doing it as part of a one-shot, where you say, here's this quirky little rule that I read in a different system or I read online, and let's incorporate it into this one-shot just to see how it works.
Yeah. We done that recently in the one-shot. I still working on the name yet, but I like to call it moments of badass, where if a player is doing something and it sounds particularly badass, I give everybody one token to use during the one shot, and it's not up to me, the DM, to decide if it's badass or not. It's up to the rest of the players. If everybody kind of goes, yeah, that's badass, then that player then gets an additional action on top of their action. It just gives people a chance to really be ballsy and creative and try and do something a little bit more risky. And it's about paying off that sort, because I can get a little bit bored sometimes whenever you're just playing a character. It's like, I hit it with my stick and do X amount of damage 4 times. It's like, alright, cool, you're doing what you're supposed to do, but that gets a little bit boring quite quick. Whereas if you can be a bit more kind of creative with the way you do it, and the rest of the table thinks that's really cool, I like to reward that, you know.
Yeah, I like the concept of your badass tokens or badass rewards. The only real comparison in the actual rules of 5e is inspiration. And what I like about inspiration is it can give a tangible reward to someone who's maybe taking a decision that isn't the most optimal, but is in line with what their character would do.
Yeah.
So you can have players who are making intentionally for roleplay reasons, for their own character, for lore reasons, they're making decisions that aren't exactly optimal, but they're doing it
because it's what their player would do, or what the character would do.
They're not playing it as purely just a game. They're treating it, and they're actually role playing and making decisions that aren't necessarily the most optimal. And it's a way of rewarding them for that. But I do feel that inspiration is a little bit underutilized, and the actual reward it gives isn't as significant as I would like. And so I think giving players like an extra moment in a moment of giving them an extra action does seem like a really interesting take on that.
Yeah, and with inspiration, sometimes players can end up holding on to them, and I think it's something a lot of people are guilty of in video games. Is they'll hoard their potions, or they'll hoard all of their things. So you'll give somebody a point of inspiration to use, and then they'll never use it because they'll always think, oh, but there might be another opportunity on that. Same with some players will hold on to their higher level spell slots. Or their higher level smites, and they'll end up never using them because they're always worried that a more opportune moment will come. Whereas with this moment of badass, it's you can use it now. If you don't use it now, then that's it, it's gone. You have to use it in that moment. So it's more of an immediate effect. How do you do inspiration, out of curiosity? I know a lot of people have different sort of rules on inspiration.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been thinking about different ways and different justifications to give out inspiration. I think the scenario I outlined previously, where you're making a decision that is lore wise or role play wise a correct decision, but maybe is mechanically not. Giving a player a reward for that does make sense. I've also thought about out of game reasons to give someone inspiration, like if they do a write up of what happened in the last session, maybe give them a point of inspiration to sort of encourage players to really get involved in sort of documenting and recounting, sort of formalizing and writing down what actually happened. It's just difficult because the actual rules are pretty vague. It sort of just basically just says at the DM's discretion.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
what do you tend to reward as your point of inspiration? How do you
inspiration,
do that?
I do it by the book, where it's a free reroll. So if you roll a dice and you roll poorly, you can just say, right, I'm using my inspiration and I get a reroll. It's like the lucky feat, but
I do mine as essentially a bardic inspiration, and it would level up depending on what the players are at, based on what a bardic inspiration now would be. And they could just use it like they would use regular old bardic inspiration. I add it to any rolls to give it a little, but they don't have to announce that they're going to use it. They can use it after they've rolled. That's how I typically would reward the bardic inspiration die.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But again, it just depends. I would usually give one if players could do a really good account of what happened last session. I always like to open up my sessions with, would anybody like to talk about what happened last week? And if somebody does a particularly good a good recall of what we've done previous session, then I'll be like, yeah, you get a good point of inspiration for that. You know?
I actually just have this personal pet peeve with expecting the DM to recall what happened in the last session. To me, it just seems that I don't like recalling what happened in the last session, partially because I'm really bad at my memory, but also because I feel like when the DM says it, it's with authority.
Yeah.
And if I say, oh, you encountered this person and you didn't like them, the players might be like, oh, we loved them. I don't know what you mean, or you're sort of taking this different perspective where when the DM says something, it is true, whereas the players might have a different perspective on that.
Yeah. For me, it also just means it lets me as the DM know that the players were listening in the last session and they took notes and they do remember it. Now, in saying that, I don't think there's anything wrong with players forgetting stuff and going to the DMs like, so what actually did happen? 4 sessions ago, who was that guy we met? Because I'm very guilty of forgetting names.
Yeah.
Things like that I think are absolutely fine, but it's nice when the players can kind of remember it.
Yeah. Alright, so we probably should stop talking about inspiration and get back to the topic of one-shots.
Yes, so what a one-shot essentially is, a one-shot is a one-and-done, little small, compartmentalized adventure that usually involves fighting some kind of big bad boss at the end of it. There's not too much story beats wise. You can sometimes throw in a little bit of lore here and there, but for the most part, it's very much a railroad adventure to fight a big boss at the end of the night. And you typically want them lasting between 4 and 6 hours. I sort of aim for mine. But you got to be careful when designing them, because if you design something you're like, oh, that'll take my players 4 hours to get through, realistically it's going to take them 8 hours.
I think we've all been part of one shots that turned into 10 shots.
Yeah, like even though we done it the weekend or the other weekend there, we had to split up into 2 sessions.
Yeah.
Which I think in the total lasted maybe about 6.5 hours.
Yeah.
Which isn't too bad for a one shot.
See, just in like philosophy, to me, one shots are on their occasions. To me, it's like I pretty much always do a Christmas one shot and a Halloween one shot, and that's about it. I think I've ran like 1 or 2 other one shots over the course of my years DMing. I just mostly run longer form campaigns, and I've never actually written a one shot. I've only ever like used one things other people have written. So I've ran like 3 different like. You fight an evil Santa Claus.
I can imagine it'd be very difficult for someone like you to write a one shot, because your brain would just go over like extra detail. I could add this and I could add that. Oh, do you know what? We'll just add an extra 3 layers to the dungeon. It'll be fine. The players will get through this.
And we're going to have a 3-hour interval where one of the NPCs gives you exposition about monster lore. I don't know. I just really like monsters. Okay, I want lots of combat. I want lots of creature and monster related information. And I want it to be like real. I don't want it to be grounded. I have a lot of hang-ups when it comes to writing D&D. Like, I've been working on a campaign to finish my Skiff Jammer campaign, and I'm on the second to last moon.
Second to last moon?
I've written like 7 moons.
Okay.
And it's taken forever. But yeah, I'm slowly working away at it. But yeah, they're... You
would be terrible for writing a one-shot.
Yeah.
I like the idea of like you have a whole calendar system designed for a single one-shot.
Oh my god, I've never actually got into calendars. I have a friend who has 2 calendars in her setting. One of them is like a moon calendar, and one of them is a solar calendar. And so she has these 2 different like cultures that each use different calendars, and she has to like match them up based on like what every...
God, that sounds so stressful.
It is so stressful.
In our main campaign, little side note, we have this time zone reoccurring joke to stress the DM out. So our campaign started on one side of the planet, and over the course of the 3 years we've ended up on the other side of the planet. Obviously there's a change in time zones, but we were given this little device to communicate with somebody on the other side of the planet, basically like Skype, except D&D-ified, so it's magic. And the guy said, contact me anytime except 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, because that's when I got band practice. The DM said it just as a little joke, and that immediately spilled into half-hour discussion about time zones and what time zones we're on. Or like, so every time we're in a new place now, we have the running joke of, that's cool and all, cool explanation of the town, all this here, but more importantly, what time zone are we on? He just looks at us and is just like, I hate you guys. Like, you were the one brought up time zones. We're just fulfilling like the lore you set in place. We want to know when it's 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, so we know not to contact this guy.
Yeah, I had in my Skiff Jammer campaign, I had this like basically a ring of sending, like a magic item that allowed you to communicate. And it was every time they called, it was like either like the assistant. They never actually got onto the real guy who was giving them the quests.
Did he work in the government by any chance?
He was like the local like baron, basically. He was the local mayor. But it was always the assistant that would always take the calls, or it was like one of the housekeepers. But every time they called, they got the new quests, and it just basically just gave a justification for them not to trek back to the first place every time they needed to get a new quest. But yeah, that was fun.
DM's got to be very careful with how they do time zones and calendars and stuff, because your players will take the hand out if you. But anyway, one shots.
Yes,
one shots. So you were saying you like to run seasonal one shots.
Yes.
What's a seasonal one shot?
So it's like it's an IRL occasion. It's either you're getting together with a new group of people and you want to run a one shot. Like I did a one shot of the first adventure in the Keys to the Golden Vault. It's like a compilation of like sort of heists, and I ran that one. It was pretty simple. You could tell it was very introductory. The players sort of managed to hide away, and no one came looking for them. There was really high security. There were like 2 security guards, and spoilers, but they found this egg, which supposedly contained, which they were told by this woman contained like the essence of like a very powerful, demon or Cthulhu monster or some horrible, evil, powerful creature. And they got up onto the roof of the building. They were jumping across to the tavern where she was, and they threw the egg across. And one of them rolled a sleight of hand check and rolled like a 7. And it slipped through his fingers and fell to the floor. And it exploded, and a wrath of tentacles started emerging, and it flew up and it started attacking them. It had the statistics of an ant cake, so it was not very powerful, but it had this like acidic bile that it like spewed out. Really fun, really cool. I think if I was going to run it again, I would force that encounter, whether they dropped it or whether it just hatched while they were transporting it. It was a really cool encounter, forcing these, like people who are pretty new to D&D or maybe more experienced to contend with this like creature that is seemingly far more powerful than they are. They're just first level, characters basically. Yeah. So that's one.
You ran a one shot for level 1 characters?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I've run like 3 or 4 different Christmas one shots that I got off the DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG, I forget. It was one of the two. And I just looked at what was recommended and I ran them. It's all basically the same thing. It's like, Santa is evil because he's possessed by a demon, and he's gonna like give all these dangerous toys to children unless you like go in, and then you have to like fight snowmen, and there's reindeer, ooh, watch out.
You can bring in Yetis for it. One of my favourite monsters.
There was one where my old DM ran me through it, and then I asked him for the link, so I ran it the next year. And there was this one point where it was a selection of cookies, and one of the cookies allowed you to travel through this portal, and there were like 7 of us playing, and there were 7 cookies, but I had just got a reindeer that I tamed, so I insisted to the DM that I fed one of the cookies to the reindeer so that one of our party members couldn't make it through, but I could bring my reindeer. So he was like, "Fine, there are 10 cookies, you can bring your reindeer." I was like, "Great." So
what did you call your reindeer?
I don't remember.
It had to be after one of the 9, like.
I remember my character though. It was Mr. Winter. He was an Eladrin, Winter Eladrin. He was a Blade-Singer wizard. Of course, he's a wizard because it's me. But then we flew through this through the portal, and then the DM handed us all a piece of the paper. Just made us do like 4 fate rolls, just random d20, no modifier, and I rolled a nat 1. And he handed me this piece of paper. It just said, "You are now working for the enemy. Like use all your spells and abilities to fight against your own players." So I was flying around in a reindeer, shooting like web and like Tasha. What's the tendril one? The Evan Yurd's black tentacles.
Yeah.
I was using all these like area control spells. I wasn't intentionally like shooting firebolt at them or fireball, but I was using all these like area battlefield control spells to like hem them in. And then at the end of the encounter, it was really fun. I finally broke free of this mental magic that was controlling me, and I realized that the crown on top of Santa's head was the thing that was turning him evil. So I got on top of his head. I used my Eladrin ability to teleport on top of his head, and then I cast what's that spell? It creates an explosion around you. It's like a
Thunderclap, is it?
Yeah, Thunderclap. So I used Thunderclap to knock the crown off his head, and the DM was ready to start narrating how it was the end of the adventure, and I was like, no. I put on the crown. It was like fine. I narrated the whole thing.
Very similar to how our first Strad campaign ended very recently for a group of people I know, but we'll talk about that in a different day.
Yeah, it was really fun. I don't get to play much because I'm mostly a DM, mostly by choice. I think I just prefer DMing. I like the control, and I like the being in control. Sort of.
A little bit of a god complex.
A little bit,
yeah. I love DMing, I do. But I have to be so careful about it sometimes. Because you've seen me DM a few times now, and you know rightly, I am chaos incarnate when it comes to DMs.
You're really laissez-faire with the rules.
I wouldn't even say laissez-faire. I literally said, I think last time I was DMing, fuck the rules, we're doing it this way. Fuck the rules. But I'm a very fair DM. I believe I'm like, if I do this, you guys can also do this kind of thing, I try to make it, one role for me and the same role for you guys kind of thing, I care more for anarchy and chaos. Hence why I'm better designed for one shot. Imagine me trying to run a long-term campaign.
Oh no!
It would end up just a nice little village, just saving it, trying to help some old woman get in their frying pan. And 5 sessions later, every player's got to be level 20 fighting all of the gods in Mount Olympus. And I don't know how it's going to get there, but I just know it'll end up in that direction, you know. I am chaos incarnate when it comes to stuff like that.
You're probably, as a DM, you're probably chaotic neutral.
Yeah. Chaotic neutral, definitely. But I that's one thing I like about one shots. It gives people who don't necessarily DM very often a chance to DM and a chance. And one of the things I love about getting new people to DM, everybody has their own DM style. Me and you two completely polar opposite DM styles.
I like the rules. I like to stay to the rules because I think it creates restriction breeds creativity. In my opinion, that like when you accept these are the rules that you have to like reside within. It then allows you to be creative. Whereas I feel like if you just say there are no rules, it almost leads to like option paralysis, where you're almost too overwhelmed by what you could do. Yeah.
No, it depends on the players I'm playing with. If I'm playing with a new group of players and they're learning D&D for the first time, I have a little small 6-session campaign that I've run through with, I want to say, about 10 different groups of people now. And that one's very rules heavy. That one is for the players to more just understand the core mechanics of D&D. And for unexperienced people, I think it's better to follow the rules 100%. Because if you go in telling the rules don't matter and then they go into another long-running campaign, they'll be like, well, my DM said this or my DM said that there. And then you just create a more turbulent experience for new players in the future. Yeah. It's only with experienced people that I'll be lax with the rules on. Yeah. So, for example, us playing the other week, I think we've all been playing it for at least 8-9 years. Yeah. Something along those lines.
Like nearly 30 years.
Yeah, between all of us, easily almost 30 years. So I knew you guys could adapt to those kinds of situations and know that you would understand that this is just in a little bubble. Yeah. What happens in this campaign what happens in this one shot stays in this one shot kind of thing. What war crimes you commit here, nobody's going to talk about them afterwards, you know. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, I've started doing a thing where before we do a campaign, I do a hypothetical one shot. It's not a real one shot. It's just a combat encounter, just for people to get like used to their character, used to their spells, like sort of that sort of thing. I did it, and I have a couple of different like. I'm a monster guy, so I love monsters. So I'm like, here's a cool monster. I have no idea how I would use it, except here's an example of how I would use it in this one very specific example, and I would just run them through that. That little like 6-shot that you run for like 10 different groups, is that like a published thing, or did you come up with it?
Oh no, it's just something I came up with myself. Yeah. So it's a Hag's Coven one, and I love Hags. Hags are my really favorite monsters. But it's just got all your basic sort of things that you need to know about playing D&D. So it's got all your role play. It's got your detective aspect of figuring things out. It's got your mystery, trying to figure out where to go next. It's got your branching paths of like, do we go this direction? Do we go this direction? It's got your moments of questionable morals of like, do we kill this thing or do we not kill this thing? You know, all of those sort of core things that players might need in future campaigns and stuff. And it's gone down really well. And one of the things I've loved about running that with so many different groups is every single group that I've run through.
Do I pause?
Yeah. So one of the things I love about running through that little short session with multiple groups of players is every single group of players I've run through it with have all approached it in different ways and creative ways. And I, as someone who's been playing D&D for a better part of 9 years now, introducing those new groups of players consistently to the same set of challenges has shown me different perspectives as well. And with new players, they don't really understand the rules and mechanics, so they're asking me questions that I never even thought existed sometimes, you know. Like one group of players decided to just split off from the party completely because she had a spell called Speak with Animals. Like, I'm going to go make friends with animals. I'm like, okay, cool, you can do that. And ended up befriending a pack of wolves. And they ended up taking that pack of wolves into a dragon encounter later on. And I was like, that's awesome, so it is. That's really, really cool. She did find it a little bit stressful. She wasn't just controlling her own character, but 5 other wolves as well. But it's really cool seeing new players approach situations like that. And people can be afraid of using the speak with animals spell, you know.
Yeah. I have so many campaigns that I want to run that I rarely revisit the same one unless I really like it. I think like the only 5e modules that I reran is Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden, which I played in once, have ran once, and I'm currently running. And then also Waterdeep Dragon House, which I've ran twice, and I'm just starting a new one on Mondays to run that again. But there's one that I keep coming back to, this one little module that I love. It's a really old one from Advanced D&D. It's called Against the Cult of the Reptile God. It's actually the first video I ever uploaded to my channel was a review of it because I just love it so much. And it's this really cool little sort of dungeon setting where the first episode, the first sort of session is a lot of like role-play encounters. You're going into this village where people keep disappearing and then reappearing, and there's definitely something going on, and you have to like work out what's going on in this little village. And as you speak to more people, you sort of start to unravel the mystery that's going on, and then you find out by going into the temple that there's a lizard cult. There's a naga, who is sort of mind controlling these people. And it was the first introduction of the Naga. It was created for this adventure.
It was the very first time they were ever.
I think so. I mean, I might be wrong. Who knows? But as far as I know, it was one of the earliest.
We don't fact check this podcast.
No, I'm not fact checking. So I it's a really cool adventure, and I've run it for like 3 or 4 different people using 3 or 4 different systems. I ran it using 5e, Basic Fantasy, and Dungeon Crawl Classics because it's such all those old modules are so transferable because it's just sort of it just gives you like a basic framework of how to set it up, and I've really enjoyed seeing different people sort of take on that. And there's really sort of fun little twists that happen depending on the character's choices. There was like the woman who they save in the temple who was kidnapped, was about to be mind controlled by the Naga, is the daughter of the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper has been converted into the Naga cult, and the party just killed him. She was like, "Oh great, you can finally save my father. He's the shopkeeper." And they were just like head and hands. Oh my god, what have we done? Can we tell this woman what we've just done? And some really fun little things can happen from just different people doing different things in the same encounter.
Yeah.
And if you do run something small, you can just sort of reuse it and see these different perspectives on the same material.
Yeah. Especially when you're doing it with new players as well. Whenever you're DMing for a group of new players, it can be quite daunting for the DM to sit and have to, because some of the rules you might have to explain 5 or 6 times. So that's why I like running something that's very familiar for me. I can run that basically off the top of my head now. I don't really need to be referring to my notes or anything. So anytime the players have a lower question they get there, I immediately know it off the top of my head. And because I can macro-manage all of the details of the campaign, I can then micromanage all of the players and all of their questions and make it seem like a much more fluid experience. Because we've all been in DM situations where something will happen and the DM's kind of like, "Oh, I didn't prepare for this, or I don't have an answer for this," and you're kind of like, give me a minute or two to figure it. It's something that all DMs have to do, and even the best DMs will have to take a little moment of just being like, "Okay, give me a few minutes. I wasn't expecting you guys to commit mass murder in the town, or commit regicide, or do whatever the hell you were doing. I need to sit and have a wee quick."
Sometimes you have to just say the phrase,
"Are you sure?"
No, I have this information, but I don't have it at hand. You have to say, like, the information does exist. You have to sort of keep the verisimilitude, like this like feeling that the world is real. Without just sort of bullshitting, basically.
One of my favourite outs to use as a DM, and I think this is the most terrifying line a DM can ever say. The player's asked to do something, and you just respond with, "Are you sure?" The most terrifying thing a DM could say. And most players will be like, "Oh, do you know what? No, I'm not going to do that." But
or you can try.
Yeah, you can try. And then in which case, most players will be like, "Oh, I changed my mind." But then you get the new players and like, "Of course, I'm sure I'm going to do that there. I'm going to kick the king in the nuts," kind of thing. It's like, all right. Like, do you remember one of the very first campaigns you ran for us? And I was playing this paladin, and we had to take our weapons off to go into the town or beat the king or something like that there, and I refused to. And you were like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Of course I'm sure. I'm a paladin. I'm not letting go of my weapons." Are you sure you have to take your weapons off?" and that was only session 0. I'm pretty sure it was even session 1, and that character just had to go to jail. And then we continued on with the rest of the campaign. I had to make a whole new character, and my old character was still in the mines, just breaking stone away because I didn't listen to the DM.
I think we talked about that in the last episode, and he was the only character that actually survived that.
Oh yeah.
So in the end, it might have been like the right call.
Oh, she's henches all hell now, breaking rocks for the last 20 or so years, you know.
Will we get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast?
Yes. So we are going to have a little discussion about the creation of a one-shot and the one-shot that we actually ran through.
Yeah.
So this little one-shot we're going to talk about is one that I created for Conal and a few other of our friends.
Thanks for doxing my name. Thanks for doxing my name.
Sorry. For LSD20. We can mute that bit out. we'll add the bleep. Yes, so this is a little one-shot I designed. I planned it being in and around 6 hours. And it's about a mind flayer colony that is in the early process of taking over Waterdeep. And it's for higher level parties. It's for player. I think I designed this for 3 level 14s, but you could easily make it, 6 level 11s maybe, if I'm still not 100% sure how to balance it for bigger parties.
Yeah.
But it's very much, it's got a little bit of lore, it's got a little bit of roleplay, but it's very much like a building up to a big boss encounter, and that's the meat and potatoes of what it is. So it simply starts very, very. All of these notes will be uploaded as well. There'll be a link in the description if anybody wants to read through it.
Presumably a Google Doc or a PDF or something. You can take it and run or adjust it and do whatever you want with it.
Oh yeah. I'm putting very much the skeleton framework for it in. You can take little bits as inspiration for one of your one shots or even one of your big campaigns, or you can run it exactly as is. It's completely up to you. It's all homebrew, and so it starts off. A small group of players have been invited by a mysterious benefactor known as the name of X to figure out why people are going missing in the city of Waterdeep. And the players go and meet this character, and they find out that it's Xanathar. He's a very important player in the political system of Waterdeep.
He's a mover and shaker.
He's a mover and shaker, yeah.
He's got his own little, I don't want to use the word cult, but he's got his own little following, his own little entourage.
Yeah. And I like to do that with my one-shots, is I like to add characters that are actually in the Sword Coast lore, because that makes it feel like it is part of the D&D universe in a way. It's not just me throwing out random names of characters that don't matter.
Yeah.
If I had said it was just some random dude, he was a criminal lord, you guys would be like, alright, whatever. But then when you find out it's Xanathar, you're kind of like, oh, this is Xanathar. I've read his book. He's great.
His guide to everything.
I've read his guide to everything. Yeah, and it just makes it feel a little bit more fleshed out. That's why I used the city of Waterdeep as well, because it's a place that some players may be familiar with. You're playing as level 14 characters. Some of you guys might actually be from Waterdeep, and that could give you benefits through the one shot later on. So it very much starts off, he sends the players on a quest to find out why people are going missing, and it inevitably leads them to a church where they meet this character called Harley Warren. And as they're getting to the church, they see a large group of people gathered outside, and Harley's given a speech. And Harley is quite a sickly old man. He doesn't look too well. You sort of see his face gone like a purplish complexion, but he's still very much loud, bolstering kind of voice, and the people are listening to every word he's saying. And I have a little speech, it'll be up on the description for you guys, but essentially all he's saying is, drink from these fountains around the church, for they are blessed with knowledge. The sort of purpose of his speech is to get the people to drink this water, and then they get infected with the mind player tadpoles. In which case sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, when we were running through it, I was very cautious of this. And I think we cast, detect magic, and we were using some, basic divination spells to try to work out what was going on. And as far as we could tell, it was just normal water.
It was just normal water,
As far as we could tell.
As far as you could tell, yeah. Because the mind the tadpoles themselves aren't actually magical.
Yeah.
They're just little animals within the water. If somebody had it detected for foreign bodies in the water, for example, but you guys was very much focused on it must be magical to some degree. It must be magical, because at this stage you didn't know it was mind flayers.
Yeah.
You were like, it must be magic or something, and I was like, you're so close, but I can't quite give you the answer to it. Can't quite give you the answer. And it's about dropping little little clues here and there throughout the camp, throughout the one shot, so the players can kind of piece it together themselves. Anyway, the priest retreats back into his church, and all of the crowd disperses to go off and do whatever they want to do, go about their daily lives. And at this stage, the players can have a chance to sort of investigate the water, investigate the grounds, and from there they can find a couple of clues. If they want to go into the church, they can investigate that as well. And they'll find a few little pages of a diary, and I actually writ out these pages and laminated them myself and give them as a handout to the players, so I myself as the DM is not reading them. The players find these physical pages and get to read them themselves. And
I've never had a DM give me laminated anything. It was like, I was so impressed.
Well, I recently bought a laminator, and let me tell you, it has upped my D&D game drastically. I love laminating things. I was laminating so many things recently that don't need laminated, but it's so much fun. You don't need to laminate it. But I have very bad handwriting, so and I'm very dyslexic as well, so my handwriting is terrible and my spelling is equally as bad. So it's fun handing these scribbles of a madman out, because this was written by a man who probably is he's very, very sick himself. He can't write the best. His mind's getting infected by mind flayer, so his spelling's probably not that great. At least that's my excuse that I'm using for the mistakes. So it's fun handing these out to players, and they have lots of clues. I'm not going to read them out again. They'll be in the description for you guys if you want. But very much pieced together that he met this strange character, and since then he's been having thoughts in his head. It feels like a voice is talking to him, and he's been very ill. And at this stage, players are starting to put the pieces of the puzzle into place, but they haven't quite got a perfect answer. And it isn't until the players explore a certain room of the church that's been barricaded in, you can feel something scratching, like a dog almost. And it's at this stage, if the players do decide to take the barricade down, they find an intellect devour, and that is their first official combat. Now, it's just a little tiny intellect devour. It's no real threat. But what that little intellect devourer is that's the final piece of the puzzle. That lets the players know, damn, we got something. We know what we're fighting now. This is mind flayer stuff we have to encounter.
It's aberrations, it's mind flayers, it's some extraterrestrial stuff. Yeah,
and at this stage you can see the players begin to sort of panic a little bit, because like, oh, I thought this was going to be a dragon, or I thought this was going to be, you know, just a big deity or something we're fighting, but this is mind flayers. And if you know anything about mind flayers in D&D, is they are scary. Mind flayers are terrifying. No matter what level your party is, mind flayers are always going to be terrifying to fight against.
My favorite ability of the mind flayers is that ability where if you're grappled by them, they can like.
I was trying so hard to make that happen.
They just basically bore into your skull and eat your brain out. I had that in like a scripted event in my Skiffjammer campaign where there's this mind flayer arcanist who did that to one of their rebels. I was trying really hard to like make it so it was very clearly a scene that was happening, and it wasn't something to be interacted with, by putting up a wall of force between them. And it was a bit ham-fisted, to be honest, but I really enjoyed their reactions when they saw this great sort of rebel who'd given this great very sort of like socialist and communist almost this really long not debate, like speech, where he went into detail about the oppression of the Astro Elves and how they were exploiting the Githyanki proletariat. And
I was so tempted whenever I was writing this to involve the Githyanki to some degree, and I actually wrote some stuff for the Githyankis to maybe make a bit of an appearance in it. And I very quickly started spilling out into, this isn't a one-shot anymore, this turned into a full-on campaign, so I had to cut all that there from it, but I might develop it more in the future.
My favourite thing about the Githyanki, the little like nugget of lore, is the fact that they live in the Astral Sea, and you don't age in the Astral Sea, which means you can't age or have children. So they intentionally settled on the prime material in order for them to age and have children. And there was like a lot of sort of story beats that were centered around that, where, for example, there was the cleric who was running the church. He was looking desperately for someone else to take over his role so that he could go back to the Astral Sea and not die of old age. You know, and you had the the Githyanki, who are generally, sort of like, evil aligned, where it was very clear that they were more sort of neutral, and they were just sort of this exploited class of people living in this city called Sea Shepspa. And I put a lot of time into crafting the world of Sea Shepspa and integrating a lot of the lore of the Githyanki, and I had a lot of allusions to the Mind Flayers and to their history with the Mind Flayers. I didn't include any red dragons. I know that the Githyanki are typically associated with red dragons, but the party was like level 3, and I was like, I'm not throwing a wormling in there. I've already had a dragon wormling. I don't feel like I want to throw another dragon at them. So other than that, I included a lot of lore.
That's the thing with Mind Flayers and Githyankis. Whenever you're using them as your basis for a campaign, is there's so much supporting stuff for them, and you can do so much with them. And that's one of the difficult things I found about writing this little one shot was there's so much supporting material for them. There's so much to use, and cutting some of that stuff can be a wee bit tricky sometimes. So I kind of have to streamline it for a one shot. But I wanted to use Mind Flayers in this because I've never really gotten to play Mind Flayers before. And the players that were playing, I believe, never really fought proper Mind Flayers before, so it was a chance to just experience that side of D&D. And from writing this here, I really want to do a full-on Mind Flayer campaign sometime. I really do. I'm probably going to flesh this one out over the next couple of months.
I have some recommendations for you. What was that first campaign we played? The Fandelver one.
Minds of Fandelver,
Yeah, Lost Minds of Fandelver. They've recently re-released it with like a level 5 to level 11 arc, where it's about Mind Flayers.
Oh, that's cool.
And there's also a third-party thing that was on the DM's Guild. It was previously only available in PDF. I personally hate PDF, so I never bought it. But then they recently re-released it as a print-on-demand hard book, and I bought it. It's called Call from the Deep, and it's this like really cool. Really highly rated. I've only read the first sort of 40 or so pages, and when I was considering running it, but I'm still considering running it. But it's this long story where it's all these like pirates, and it's very coastal. It's all set in on these islands.
I love a pirate campaign.
It starts off as a pirate campaign that turns into a Mind Flayer campaign, and the big bad boss at the end of it is a Mind Flayer elder brain that has been implanted in the body of a kraken.
Oh,
it's so cool.
That's badass.
It's so cool.
Badass.
It's so cool. Spoilers, by the way.
I think with Mind Flayers, they Mind Flayers are a lot like dragons. They kind of warrant their full episode in the podcast someday. We should talk about Mind Flayers in depth because there's so much there with them.
They might be my favorite monster.
Yeah. They're cool because they're not just your typical big dumb scary thing that hits hard. They're intelligent creatures. They're Mind Flayers. They're awesome.
I wish that 5e supported psionics more. In previous editions, Mind Flayers were explicitly psionic creatures. They used their mind and the power of their mind to attack. But in in culture, Mind Flayers shun magic. So, but then in 5th edition they sort of changed that, and they added different stat blocks for magic wielding Mind Flayers, like the Mind Flayer Arcanist. And I just would really like to see the mental magic used by the Mind Flayers expressed in a way that wasn't a spell.
Because it's not technically magic either.
Like
I think that actually came up in the one shot. Somebody was trying to use I think you were trying to use counter spell, but it wasn't technically a spell they were using. Yeah,
so it's just something to consider. That there are some spells where they're trying to incorporate psionic-like abilities, like with the Soul Knife Rogue subclass. Or with like Tasha's Mind Whip.
Because they only really have their Mind Blast ability, which is awesome, but it's all they really have with that. And the rest of their spells are just kind of ripped straight out of the player handbook kind of thing. So, it'd be cool to see a bit more support with things like that. But you could always sort of homebrew some of your own techniques for that
There was an Unearthed Arcana for psionics, but from what I hear, it was like really unbalanced. And the problem with psionics is it does sort of need its own rules system separate from magic. Trying to sort of cross that T and loop that knot is difficult when you consider that it is sort of its own thing, separate from magic.
I mean, I think if any race of enemies deserved it would be Mind Flayers. They are one of the true big bads of Dungeons and Dragons. They're up there with dragons and beholders. They are a quintessential part of what makes D&D D&D.
Dragons have the breath weapon, and it's in the rules. 5-6 recharge breath weapon, and there are these rules explicitly just for dragon's breath because dragons are so popular in D&D. Beholders, they have all these eye rays, and you roll and you see which ray does what, and other rays happen. I don't see why mind flayers can't just have their own rules around psionics because they are so integral to D&D. I would put mind flayers up there with beholders, with dragons,
100%,
as being like the most important monsters in D&D.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think a lot of DMs might shy away from mind flayers as well because they're complex enemies to play. With a dragon or beholder, you're just sort of got your one big bad for it. Whereas with mind flayers, mind flayers are essentially a colony. You're playing this entity of hundreds or thousands or sometimes millions of individual characters that lead up into one technical brain.
Yeah.
So whenever you're talking to mind flayer, you're not just talking to that one mind flayer, you're talking to the entire colony.
Yeah.
That can sometimes be quite difficult to roleplay. I definitely shied away from that for the one shot because I didn't really know how to play it, and I feel like I would have made it a little bit complex. So I think definitely having rules in place to describe how one might DM this group of enemies, because like there's plenty of rules explain how you would roleplay as a beholder, roleplay as a dragon, whereas with mind flayers, how do you roleplay this colony of brains? That's quite tricky.
In one word, I would say it's a hive mind.
Yeah, hive mind.
It's a collective intelligence where if one knows, they all know.
Yeah.
And as a real world comparison, it's kind of like an ant colony where they all have their own sort of little jobs independently. They're all little drones doing their own business. But if one finds out something, they can like signal to all of them.
Yeah.
And they all collectively work as a force. So if you're going to a mind flayer colony, you really have to use some powerful magic to like dispel magic, like somehow in order to avoid that. But it's such an integral part.
I did make some special loot that allowed me to overcome that problem for you guys. But I'll talk about that there in a minute.
Yeah.
We
should probably go back to the
going back. So yes, they'll find a secret. Going back to the one shot. Mind flayers are really cool. Mind flayers are really cool. So anyway, going back to the one shots, the players will fight the little intellect devourer, and at that stage they'll know what they're fighting. Upon exploring the church a little bit more, they'll find a secret underground passage, and the players will travel through this passage. And as they travel through, they'll feel the walls begin to turn more fleshy. They'll feel like tentacles will come out and attack them in this tunnel. Very much transition from regular stone to full-on fleshy mind flayer kind of environment. And once they come out of this here tunnel, they'll encounter the priest, Harley Warren. And at this stage, he's very, very ill. He's coughing up blood. He's gone completely sort of sickly purple coloured. And the players will get a brief moment to try and talk to him, but he'll very much begin the process of, I'm going to mispronounce this.
Ceramorphosis.
I call it ceramorphosis.
Yeah.
Morphosis.
Yeah, ceramorphosis.
Ceramorphosis, which is basically the transformation of a being into a mind flayer. And it's very, very cool. You begin to see tentacles are up, their cranium expand. They'll begin to grow a little bit taller, more slender. It's just a really cool transformation. It's like turning into a werewolf in a way. And the players will get to fight him then. And at that stage, as he's almost dead, he'll completely retreat with Dimension Door. Although, if your players are smart, they'll cast Counter Spell, which I'm so going to ban in my future one-shots. And he plays a story beat later on. But unfortunately, you guys missed out that because you were adamant about killing the poor guy. And from there, the players will find themselves in this large cavern where they'll meet a Mind Witness. Mind Witnesses, by the way, the Mind Flayers can infect anything, anything, beholders included. So whenever Xanathar said he sent a couple of guys down to find out what was going on, he sent down one of his lore beholders that he was in charge of. I don't know how much that ties into the actual lore of Xanathar, but I thought playing a Mind Witness would be cool.
Yeah.
So they find this beholder with a little single piece of a stone tablet that he's hiding away around the cavern, and it'll begin a little combat encounter with this here beholder. Upon killing it, they'll find this big massive stone door with a indent of a square, and players, after a little bit of searching around a cavern, they'll find these 10 pieces of a puzzle that build into this here perfectly square tablet. And I always liked involving some kind of puzzle in my one-shots, And I try to shy away from riddles because even the simplest of riddles can send players through a loop. So for this puzzle, I like to make a little jigsaw piece. So I designed this little square with a bunch of symbols on it that all connect with each other and then cut it into intricate shapes. And I was like, as you're exploring this cavern, you find these 10 slabs and you've kind of realised that you're supposed to put them in a perfect square and place them in this door. At this stage, I give the players a little bag of puzzle pieces that are supposed to represent the tablets, and it's a chance for the players to kind of like, oh, it's a physical puzzle that I can actually touch, and it's no more than a jigsaw puzzle, really, when you look at it. But it gives the players a sort of chance to, because like sometimes when a puzzle comes up, you'll have your smart players really trying to decipher it, and then your players who might not be that smart sort of being like, oh, I'm never going to figure that out. Whereas when you give them a jigsaw puzzle, everybody's like, oh, and this bit goes there, and this bit can go there, and it's really fun watching players sort of figure that out. It also gives me, the DM, a wee chance to just be like, right, I'm going to breathe, they don't need help for a bit.
Go for a cigarette.
Go out for a cigarette, go to the toilet, whatever. And I just like it. And then when they figure it out, they never spend more than about 5 minutes on it, really.
Order a takeaway, take a trip to Japan.
Yeah. And seeing them figure out, they're like, we done it, we figured it out. Because like with the riddle, it's always one person figures out, whereas with this one, it's like a collective thing of everybody trying to get it working, and whenever you figure it out, you're all proud of yourself. And I love that. And at this stage, I reward the players with some loot. I'm not going to break down the loot too much that I give the players. Some of it's very, very powerful. I'll put it up into the description later on as well if you guys want to use this loot. This is all homebrewed loot. Is it balanced? No. Is it badass? Yes. But I'm going to explain one of the ways that I sort of overcome the Mind Flayer. What was the word we were using?
Ceramorphosis?
No, not the ceramorphosis. So the way with one Mind Flayer.
Oh, hive mind.
The hive mind aspect, yes. So the players could go in here with all the Mind Flayers knowing. So they had that element of surprise. So it's called the Sentinel's Watch. It's a little amulet, and it gives +1 to AC. And it also gives advantage on all intelligent and wisdom saving throws and checks. And it's got a special ability, whereas all allies within 10 feet of you gain the advantage on intelligence and wisdom checks, but it also allows you guys to be immune to as long as you're all within 10 feet, gives you guys immunity to the Mind Flayers knowing you are there. It gives you kind of like a psychic invisibility type field, and that's sort of how I got away from as soon as as soon as you guys went to the Mind Flayer colony, they didn't all know you were there, kind of thing. It's an easy cop out, but it just made they've just made the one shot a little bit easier to play.
So like, there's a couple of interesting points I want to bring up, which is that there's like one spell that can get around it, which I think is called Blank Mind or Clear Mind.
Yeah, there was, and I was tempted to put a scroll in for it. I was tempted to use scrolls instead, but I like the idea of making that little ability because that can also be used in the big boss fight as well to kind of negate the big boss's Mind Blast attack, which is essentially like that boss's version of a Dragon Breath attack, and give you guys all a fighting chance, because at least with the Dragon Breath attack, it attacks in a cone, whereas this Mind Blast attack, it's more like a big radius, so you would have had no way of really dodging it. There's the Dragon Breath, you can kind of hide behind a rock or something. I wanted to give you guys something that you could kind of use to negate the ability of the big boss. Give you a bit more tools to sort of use to give you a better fighting chance.
That makes sense.
So
another point I wanted to bring up was, it's a little bit tangent, but Mind Flayers have this thing where they can't sense someone if their intelligence is so low.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting, and it actually...
What is it, anything less than 6, is it?
Something like 3, I think.
Oh, that low?
In my head, In my head, it had to be like a very primitive sort of... Anyway, but there's one specific monster I wanted to mention, which is the Neolithid. Do you know the Neolithid?
Yes, I know Neolithids very well.
There's this thing in Mind Flayer lore where if a tadpole isn't...
Can we touch on that in a little while?
Okay, yeah.
A little while, because I do want to touch on that there in a moment.
Okay.
Don't worry, it'll all wrap right and get a chance to talk about Neolithids.
Okay.
We'll talk about that there soon. But yeah, essentially the players go through this Mind Flayer colony and they get a little bit about lore about what Mind Flayers are. They'll encounter one or two more that they get to fight. They'll encounter some prisons with people that are going through ceramorphosis. The players have an opportunity to kill those things that are infected. My players did, because they're psychopaths. They didn't want to try and save them. And also find loads of little interesting bits of lore to tie in with it. I very much railroad my players through this here dungeon because it was a little bit bigger than I initially wanted it to be, but again with my players there's a lot to cover. And eventually they'll encounter, if they didn't kill him, they'll encounter Harley Warren and they'll see him rush down this here tunnel, and if they follow him they'll see him reappear completely regenerated, completely max HP, ready to fight again, and players can have another combat with him then. And they'll realise if they go through there, they'll find this spring, this body of water, and it's just before the boss room, but it's this body of water that has existed since basically the beginning of time. And although the rest of the tunnel system has become infected with the fleshiness of the mind flayers and infected with it, this area where the water is, it hasn't been infected. It's perfect stone. The water itself is perfectly crystal clear. And this water, I described it as it's more like an entity of healing, and it's basically just a chance for the players to have a long rest. They just go into the water and immediately all their spell slots and stuff like that there restored. It's basically a get you all topped up before going to fight the big boss. Because throughout whenever my players going through the dungeon, every other room they went in is like, I can have a long rest, I can have a long rest, I can have a long... You can't have a long rest in a mind player colony. It's a terrible idea. No, it's a terrible idea. But unfortunately, my players decided to kill Harley Warren before he got the chance to do that. So whenever they encountered this body of water, they were like, oh no, I don't trust this, I don't trust this, I don't trust this, and refused to go into the body of water until I literally had to say, no, it's perfectly safe, you don't have to. It's to get you guys topped up before you fight the big boss.
One critique I would say is that you've introduced water twice, and one of them was dangerous and one of them wasn't. So it might have been more helpful to, instead of it being water in the first thing, if it was like wine or beer.
Oh yeah.
To differentiate that this water is not the same magical water from before that had the mind flare tadpoles in it.
Oh yeah, I totally get how I might have messed up that a little bit. Yeah,
it's just a little a little sort of you want players to sort of pick up things as they go, and as long as you sort of differentiate, these two things are very different because you have two instances of magical water, one helpful and not helpful. So
no, that's a good point. I was just trying to find a way to give everybody sort of topped up in health, get them a long rest without having a long rest.
One thing that I've done occasionally is I just make the next room a potions crafter, like an alchemist, and it's like, oh yeah, healing potions, and
I don't know. Are you going to drink a bunch of potions you find in a mind flayer colony?
That is true.
Yeah, there was just a chance to get everybody topped up because everybody had taken a bit of damage. They'd used some of the spell slots and stuff. And whenever I want you fighting the big boss, I want you fighting in fully topped up, fully ready to go. Anyway, they go in and then they encounter what you find is an Elder Brain, which is your big sort of leader of the colony per se, and they have a big epic boss fight against that there. And again, if you want to learn more about the Elder Brain, how to run it, I'm not going to talk about that here. Look it up on, I believe he is in Volos. I want to say, I don't think he's in the Monster Manual. I'll put just a few notes up later on about how I ran that particular boss. I included a few extra mind flayers and stuff, some intellect devourers, just to add a little bit of a dynamic aspects, and not just fighting one big boss creature. The players hopefully will win, and the credits will roll, and that's the one shot over. I always like to add a little brief epilogue. So a couple of months later, the players were still in Waterdeep chilling. They got all this gold, so they're just taking some time off. And a character called Volo invites them to the tavern because he wants to talk about it, because he's writing a book based around monsters. It's part of Volo's Guide to Monsters. And he's writing that book, and all the information that the players give him there is actually the same information in Volo's book, which I thought was a nice way to tie it in. And it ends with Volo asking, so what did you guys do about the tadpoles? And the players sort of go, what? It's like, the tadpoles, the tadpoles that they used to infect people with. And it's like, players sort of go, oh, we kind of forgot about that there. And Volo kind of panics a little bit. It's like, no, you surely you've done something about it. And at this stage then, you hear a loud crash and people panic in the streets. Players go outside and boom, then you see what you wanted to talk about earlier, a neolithid explode out, and that's when I end the campaign. It's like, we can continue that there one shot on next year if you want. I like that there as like a little epilogue, and I love an after credits scene. You know, love a good after credits scene. Love a good after credits scene. Because Neolithics are cool, man. Neolithics are cool. You want to talk about them, didn't you?
Yeah, I just think they're really cool. The whole point of Neolithics is that they're very they're sort of the opposite of a Mind Flayer. They're very unintelligent but very physically powerful, whereas Mind Flayers are very mentally powerful but very physically frail. Yeah, and they're the same species. Like a tadpole left alone will turn into a Neolithid. I had in my Skiff Jammer campaign, I had the patron of a warlock try to convince her to release a tadpole into the wild, and she wouldn't do it, and she wasn't sure why not. And then eventually I explained to them what a Neolithid was, because I had the Githyanki priest explain the whole process, and she was like, "Thank God I didn't." But yeah, there's a couple of points I just wanted to mention, which was that like Ceramorphosis, it is primarily, or at least in previous editions, it was exclusively for medium-sized humanoids, and it sort of failed with different creatures. But then recently in 5th edition, they've been introducing what I call experimental Ceramorphosis. So there's one, I made a video on called the Etten Ceramorph. So like an Etten, a two-headed giant. One of the heads is looks like a Mind Flayer. It has the body of a Mind Flayer. Oh, that's cool. But then in the middle of its body, a second Mind Flayer head is there, and they both act independently, and they both control different parts of it. That's cool. It's a two-headed Mind Flayer, and it could make for. And what I like about it is that it is physically powerful. It has very powerful physical attacks, which you don't normally get with Mind Flayers. But it's because the base that it turned from was the Etten, a very powerful, physically powerful creature. And I really like that.
One of my favourite ones. Again, I'm going to need a dedicated. Should we just rename this to the Mind Flayer episode? But just a brief one talking about experimental monsters. I think we all have to talk about it. The Mind Flayer dragon.
Oh yeah.
The Mind Flayer dragon. Yeah. Oh, he's so cool. No, I think that's in Volos as well, actually.
Okay, I believe you.
I'm not too sure. I think it's in Volos.
I thought it was in. Have the book upstairs.
It could be in Fizbin. We don't fact check here. Okay. we'll talk about it properly in a Mind Flayer episode, I think. But yeah, I love the experimental stuff, and I like experimenting with like bugbears as Mind Flayers and stuff. All that there kind of jazz. But essentially, that is the one shot. Yeah. And whenever you get to the dungeon, I don't do each room as a full set encounter. I just sort of go, you go into this room, this is what you see here, you fight a few Mind Flayers, da-di-da-di-da, but I'm very much sort of edging the players towards the big final boss, because if you go through each room individually, you can end up spending a good hour per room, sometimes depending on the information in the room. So that stage, I take sort of free reign off the players. I'm like, you could choose to go left or right kind of thing, but I'm not letting you experiment too much in the room, because it'll take too much time. Because that dungeon itself could take 2 sessions, realistically. It's that big.
In my personal estimations, I would say it takes about 45 minutes per combat. And if it's a regular size combat, if it's a big final one, maybe an hour and a half.
I think you guys spent 2 hours fighting that. I want to say it was about 2 hours. So again, with one shots, you will have to railroad a little bit. Obviously, still let the players have as much free reign as they can, but within reason. There was a stage where early on, you were reading Harley Warren's notes, and he was talking about how he met this mysterious character in the pub, and that's how he got infected. Some of the players were immediately like, "Oh, well, let's go to the pub." And as soon as I registered that, I was like, "Damn, I shouldn't have said about the pub." If they go to the tavern, they're going to end up wanting to have a few drinks, talking to everybody in the pub, playing some pub games. And don't get me wrong, I love a tavern session. I do want to cover tavern sessions at some stage. But I was like, this is going to take a good hour. I've DM'd enough. I know that these guys will spend a good hour in here, and it's not relevant to the plot. And I was like, just trust me, guys. And you have to do this sometimes with one shots. It's like, you don't want to go that way. That's not the way to go. Just go this way. And it's sort of healthy railroading, because it keeps you on a good time constraint as well. With the one shot, you are very much constrained to times. You know what I mean? You don't want to be going over 6 hours. It's that stage. People start losing interest. People start getting tired. People have responsibilities. So that sometimes you have to railroad to create the experience. And that's part and parcel of it. Your players have to be willing for that as well. So it's important to have that discussion at the beginning of a one shot about like, these are some of the homebrew rules. I'm going to be railroading yes. Things like that. There, have that discussion with the players and let them know what kind of experience you're going to have. And if they don't want to do it, that's fine as well. You know, we like to make players aware. Yeah. Any other topics you'd like to talk about regarding one shots?
I guess, do you have any like specific things that are published that you want to recommend people to play through?
All the one shots I played in or DM myself have always been homebrew. I've actually never really run a proper module before. I have to a degree, but I've always homebrewed more stuff, I suppose. One of my favourites, one shots, it's a long running one shot, which doesn't make sense really when you think about it. It's a Halloween one shot, and every Halloween we do a Halloween themed one shot, and we create characters for it. And the first one was during the pandemic, and we all had to create video game characters. So I created Geralt from The Witcher, another guy created Kratos, another guy created what do you call your man from Castlevania with the whip thing? I can't remember him. But we all created video game characters. Somebody tried to create the Master Chief, and the DM was like, "No, you're not playing the Master Chief. Can it be Doom Guy instead?" No. Sorry, you have to be Middle Fantasy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a haunted house one shot. I love a haunted house in D&D. You could do so many fun, wacky things. You know, we had zombies, we had ghosts, we had zombie beholder, which was cool. We had this area downstairs where they were trying to make Frankenstein, and we made Frankenstein. And we found all these like secret pages that tied together with this haunted doll. The haunted doll was the big bad evil of it all, and she was in charge of the whole house. And during the final encounter, she collapsed the house in us and then escaped. Then we done another Halloween one shot the year after. We found out with different characters, and we found out it's the same doll. And then we done another Halloween encounter, and we found out the people behind that was the same doll. And we even done an encounter in our main long running campaign where there was this strange spooky sort of area, and our players weren't tied to any of the stuff that happened with those one shots. But we started to see a few familiar things, and this was very much tied in a forest, and we encountered the same doll. But she encountered us. A big part of our campaign is these things will contact us through our dreams. And the doll noticed that and affected our dreams and completely TKO'd. It was the first time our party's been TKO'd. Completely TKO'd our party within our dreams. And we were all like, damn doll, we're going to get it someday. But it's been a reoccurring character for all of our one-shots, and someday we'll find this here doll and finish it up.
The one I would recommend is the Death House from Curse of Strahd.
Oh, yeah, that one's fun.
You played it?
I haven't, but I was watching some of my friends play through it, and it seemed so much fun.
Yeah. So if you were going to run it, I would recommend starting it at level 3, because although it's designed to start at level 1 and end at level 3, having to actually level up during session is quite time consuming. So I would say just start them at level 3 and change the final boss from a shambling mound to something like a zombie beholder. Or something else. Because it's a CR5 monster, and I think that's a little bit too powerful, so maybe pick something maybe CR4. Because level 3 players, after having like several combat encounters, are going to struggle. It would take maybe like 6 hours, is what I would estimate. That's what it took me to run through it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was well written. That's my recommendation. I mean, the Christmas ones, I don't even remember the names of them because they were so like generic. It was like it was like Santa does body blah, you know. Do I have them on this laptop?
But one shots are great. And another thing I'd like to point on is it gives players a chance to try something that they might have been too afraid to try. Like, if you've always been playing a martial class and hitting things with your sword, and you've always been a wee bit sort of afraid of using spellcaster, one-shots can offer players an opportunity to step outside their comfort zone, because like, well, I'm not making a long-term commitment with this character, I'm just using it for one session. I'm going to try. A lot of people I find are quite afraid of using the Artificer class, because I wouldn't say it's overly complicated, but it's not as simple as, let's say, Fighter, and people can be afraid of using that in a long-running campaign. But I've found a few people have wanted to play the Artificer class or a Bard for one-shots, because it's just, well, I'm not making a long-term commitment. And then they're finding, oh my god, I had loads of fun with this here Artificer. I want to play an Artificer in my next long-running campaign. It just gives players a chance to experience a more wide range of the classes in D&D, you know. Do you have any luck finding the
I
things.
couldn't find them. I
We-
found
we could-
screenshots of the maps.
We can
but
add them. We can add them to the description if you find them later.
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
Yeah,
sure,
yeah. Yeah, we'll be adding. I'm going to get this finished. I'm going to get all this road up, and well, get it uploaded on probably Google Docs. I think is probably the best way to do it for me. And you guys can have a look through it, critique it, refine it. Any complaints you have about it. I'm not taking any advice right now.
So
No.
what you should do for feedback is write it down, make sure you get all the letters written properly.
Yeah.
Put it in a bottle, seal the bottle, throw it in the ocean.
No. Post it to number 10 Downing Street.
Yes.
Yeah. That's where all my complaints should go.
Yes.
Aye.
You should address it to Larry the cat. That's
Larry
your,
the cat, yeah.
That's your name.
That's my real name,
Yeah.
yeah. Larry the cat. Or believe it or not, I'm not actually a cat, I'm a dog. It's people through a loop, you know. Yeah.
All there.
Yeah, I'm happy enough.
There.
Thank you very much for listening, guys. We'll be back not next week, but the week after. I think we haven't quite decided what we're going to talk about yet, but it's going to be something cool and fun.
All right.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.